talk about your health. Living a primal lifestyle.
You know, we have Tom from Tampa on the phone. Hey, Tom. Good morning. It's bright and early now, huh?
Hey, thanks. Good. How you guys doing, Nico?
Doing great.
Good. Hey, your newsletter's outstanding, man. I'm telling you, man, it is outstanding. And so is the Primal. I love that stuff. I'd never be without it. I mean, I've been on it now 3-4 months, man. I mean, it's just, I can't get over how good I feel.
Primal Edge is, people are raving about it. People who are trying it, they know because you can feel it.
Would not be without it.
Call now, toll free at 1-877-927-6648. Internationally at 727-445-1044. Now your hosts, Nico DeHaan and Paige Clark.
Good morning, I'm Nico DeHaan. Welcome to Living a Primal Lifestyle, where we explore a return to a more balanced, natural, wild world.
So we can recover our health, our rights, and our freedoms. And I'm Paige Clark. Good morning.
And it's a beautiful morning in downtown Clearwater. It's 77 degrees, going up into about 88 degrees today. And we're in the summer pattern, and we like that.
Yes, we're happy where we are.
That's for sure.
I hope you are, too.
Yeah, and if you want to reach us, you can reach Paige at TFNN.com, me at Nico at TFNN.com, and our phone number is
877-927-6648.
Before we start, I'd like to say happy birthday to my wonderful, beautiful wife. She's my rock.
Happy birthday, Ellen.
Number 70, and actually we've changed it because it's not 70 anymore, it's 3040.
That's
it
right.
It sounds much nicer.
Yes, I like that.
So, happy birthday, baby. I love you, and I'll see you soon.
Oh,
and we had a real
awesome.
special weekend this weekend, too. We went to Ruth's Chris.
I
for
saw
a
the
really good
pictures.
deal.
You were down at the Birchwood.
The Birchwood.
She had on her sexy Kentucky Derby type hat.
Yeah, she loves hats, and she looks so good in them.
Yes, she does.
Yeah, so we had a really good weekend, and actually we've been celebrating for pretty much the whole month because of our vacation and everything. And I think as you get older, you need to spend more time celebrating. So we've dedicated that our 70s are going to be month-long.
Well, why not just have, celebrate life? I think that's what we're
right.
supposed
And then
to do.
in our 80s, we're going to do for 3 months.
I like
The
that.
90s, we're going to do 6 months, and then, when you reach 100, I think you celebrate every damn day.
I think so, too.
So that's the way we're looking at life. Anyway, I really want to start off today. I was reading an interview about Cat James.
I love Cat James.
And Cat James had a book about it, was it a decade ago, maybe?
Yeah, The Truth About Beauty.
Yeah.
Hey, can you scroll up and show the people so they can just look at the pictures that kind of show her over the last 30 years?
Yeah, that's on another...
Oh, it is?
Yeah, but
okay, well, while you're doing it, I'll just kind of give a little introduction because, Kat is, she's been, recommending a lifestyle such as what we recommend on the Living a Primal Lifestyle. And, a diet that has healthy fats and reduces processed foods and sugars. And, a lot of this has finally been vindicated. But I think this is a really great example of what happens.
Look at the telestrator right here.
Yeah, if you can look in the telestrator and you can take a look. Here she was in 1984. You can see she's more bloated and has more weight.
In her early 20s, I would say.
Yeah.
Yeah. Then 94, and she just keeps looking better at 2014. She looks the youngest of all of it. So
yeah, I
that's
actually
pretty
think
amazing.
she does. So it really kind of shows you when we eliminate these offending foods and lifestyle things that we can really see some great results.
And one of the things that she mentioned, too, was in 1994 that we discovered the hormone leptin.
Correct.
And that's a big hormone. And recently, the largest dietary studies in history by far, such as Stanford's A to Z study and the Swedish Council on Health and Technology Assessment Review of 16,000 dietary studies, have clearly invalidated 40 years of faulty and what many believe to be politically and economically driven dietary disinformation, shown clearly that low carb, especially very low carb, high fat diets like mine, reign supreme for both weight loss and health outcomes.
And that's huge. And we've got countries like Sweden and Norway that have adopted a low-carb, higher-fat diet as the healthier diet. And I think this is a trend that we're going to continue to see, and we're glad to see it happening.
Yes, and the USDA won't go there yet, but they did strike cholesterol from the list of things to avoid for the first time since 1980.
Well, progress is slow, and lard has recently won out over common unhealthy oils. We're happy to see that. You can order healthy lard even if you don't recycle your own from companies like Epic and so forth.
Yeah, Epic makes a great one. I use that. Another study showed that low carb was the diet that allowed cancer-fighting herbs like turmeric to actually work. They could not in the presence of sugar, which
See,
is a
that's
very
a key
important
point,
thing.
folks, that the traditional cultures that have been taking turmeric and getting these great anti-inflammatory results are having it in their sauces and so forth in a fat-activated base.
Yeah, because if you go to the Sahara Desert and look at the communities there, they're using turmeric a lot in just about everything, but nowhere do you see any kind of sugar.
And you know, folks, we're hearing too that low-carb diets are being used, or ketogenic diets are being used to treat a lot of metabolic diseases such as diabetes and cancer. So what we can say, as Kat says, the fat-phobic dietary dark age is officially over. And I think this interview, and I'd like us to spend time on it because I think she has a lot of really great things to say, is that you know, when we start to get back to a diet that's more consistent with what our genes like to express themselves optimally, the results are pretty obvious by looking at Kat, I think.
Well, what's also obvious, and I always take it back to going into the woods. So if we go into the woods where there are no people, and just the animals and you are there, and now you need to survive, nowhere do you find bread, pasta, grains. You might find some seeds in the late fall, but you won't find them any other time of year. Even the nuts aren't ready to be eaten. So if you're eating a couple of those things during that time, you'd probably spike your insulin and your leptin, and you probably gain some weight, which is the perfect time to do it because it's fall, you're getting ready for winter. But nowhere else at any other time would you find any kind of sugar except maybe some natural honey, maybe some sap from trees, which tends to be bitter anyway. So it's just not in our natural world. It's all made up by us.
It is. And what I liked is she was discussing in this interview a little bit. There were a lot of headlines, and I think you all have listened to the show and you've heard us talk a little bit about the sadness of what actually happened on The Biggest Loser and how these people were paraded in front of millions and millions of viewers to lose weight, and how really what they were being told to do was not a healthy way to regain your weight. And so let's talk a little bit about what she has to say about this.
Well, one thing I have to say is that naturally those people were being beaten to death. And we see this everywhere as far as exercise. We see it, people running down the road every single morning, you know, doing
thinking
those
that's
6
going
and
to
8,
keep their
7.
weight and their cardiovascular health, and they're just exhausting themselves, and they're actually activating the stressor hormones.
Yeah, exactly right. And you can see it in the way they look. And it's innocently. I'm sure these people are thinking they're very healthy, and the arrow is actually pointing back to maybe not so much. I think we don't get enough rest. I think I work a lot better when I do, especially now, you know, I'm almost 72, and I feel that I just don't need to do as much anymore. So.
Sometimes less is more, and we've got to take a break, so we'll see you in just a few minutes. Make sure you pick up our Primal Edge, and stay tuned for more good stuff.
Yeah, and the number here is 877-927-6648.
And welcome back to Living a Primal Lifestyle. I'm Paige Clark and Nico DeHaan. We're talking about the truth about beauty. We're talking about Kat James. She's a really cool chick, and she really has helped to, introduce the world, I believe, to the master hormone leptin, which helps us with our satiety. Stop this craving and this mechanistic eating that has been created, I believe, by the food industry to profit bottom line.
Yeah, and the interesting thing is that when she started her discovery, there really was no internet. So it was around 1990. She had a 12-year eating disorder with autoimmune, thyroid problems, skin symptoms, near liver failure.
She had really elevated liver enzymes. Unhappy liver. Liver wasn't liking what she was being exposed
so she was really skeptical. She had been a vegan or a vegetarian for about 7 or 8 years. She was skeptical about herbs, but wound up surprised that both her doctor and herself were taking some of the liver enzymes.
Were coming down because she did find some alternative things that were giving her some results.
Yeah, and so she started experimenting, and there were times she said that she felt liberated because she wasn't hungry when she was doing some of her experiments.
She started paying attention.
Yeah, and she always was trying to get back to that. What was it that made her not hungry? And of course, in 1994 is when leptin was discovered, and then she could put a name on it. But slowly but surely, she was actually writing things down, the food combinations. And at first, she added fat to her grains.
Yeah, she says here, look, the one food that always preceded that elusive, deeply sated, calm state was the last food I would have imagined would soon become my go-to sanity food. and that was fat. At first, I added fat to my grains, my sprouted bread, my beans, and my stir fries. I'd been vegetarian for 7 years. I was amazed, though, at how each time I decreased those things and even cooked vegetables and upped the fat, I could sustain that freedom feeling from cravings longer and longer. I could not imagine even cutting them out together, though. Even more unimaginable would be cutting out dozens of other so-called health foods and beverages that I would eventually learn could yank me out of this amazing new feeling. So she started putting together the way she felt with her food. And that's really, when we talk about whether a food is a good food or a bad food, it's how does the food make you feel?
And that's, I think, the connection we've lost.
Yes.
You know, and especially if you're on a standard American diet, you have no connection with real food at all. You know, and that's the real danger when you think about it. These things are not real food. They're packaged food. They're put together with these companies who have no reason to be concerned about your health. They have a reason to subsist. They want to subsist, and that always evolves down to what is the first thing that we look for. We look for profit, and how can we maximize that profit? And the food that always maximizes profit is the least expensive, the food that really doesn't give us any nutrients, and those are carbohydrates.
Yeah, the Frankenfoods. So when Kate was talking with the interviewer, they asked her, what, you know, and when did you achieve that flip of into leptin sensitivity? When we say leptin sensitivity, remember the cell membrane is like the outlet where all hormones plug into. They are the receptors on the cell membrane. So in order for us to activate the hormones, it's not about replacing our hormones, it's about making them active by restoring that cell membrane, healing the cell membrane so that the hormones have a spot to plug in so they can give you the benefit. So really what she was doing was eliminating inflammatory foods so that her cell membrane healed, so all of a sudden the body and the brain recognize leptin and its very important signal. And she said her weight loss and her skin changes had become significant just from the preliminary dietary changes she made. She was starting to reject foods, even coffee, which she drank a lot, which she was probably had burned out adrenals, you know, with all her grains and stuff. But nothing prepared her for what would happen when she decided to cut out all grains, starches, juices, and low-fat Frankenfoods, and anything else that I'd been eating prior to any energy lulls, even at lunch and dinner. And about 2 days into this innocent experiment, several truly shocking things happened.
Yeah, the first thing that happened was my appetite suddenly dropped by about half. I found myself staring at the remainder of my mouth-watering lunch and could not eat another bite. It was surreal.
And energy suddenly became so steady that she forgot about the time of day or when the next meal was. 10 a.m. felt the same as 3 p.m. and 9 p.m. And I think this is something that we really notice when we get people to add the healthy fats.
Yeah, because
their world doesn't revolve around their eating.
No, and when Ellen and I went bowling on Saturday, we had this little company function from her company. Everybody was there, and we were bowling away, and Ellen and I had breakfast about 8 o'clock in the morning. So this started at 11 o'clock, and about noon, they brought out the pizza and everybody was jamming the tables, eating, and Ellen and I were still bowling. And we just kind of looked at the food. We could smell the food, and of course, to us, that food wasn't appetizing at all. And we had no problem whatsoever being around those people, being around the food, and just bowling away. And, you know, we didn't eat until 5 or 6 o'clock that evening when we went to Ruth's Chris. It's just a beautiful, liberating feeling. I always say this, and my wife and I were looking at each other just being happy and saying, isn't this great?
Right.
I mean, it's a beautiful thing.
And that you can hold out till you can get to a place where you can have some real food.
Yeah, but there's no hunger at all. I mean, you're not having those cravings. It's just amazing.
I think a lot of people are really fearful of making these changes. And here's a quote. She says, "My body no longer saw most of what was in my refrigerator as food." I think she was starting to recognize a lot of this stuff as what I call food-like merchandise.
That is the big thing right there, because that stuff, it doesn't remind you of food anymore. You have to, after, you know, of course I'm 8, 9, 10 years into this thing. So it's much easier, and as you go along, you'll get easier and easier. And that stuff doesn't, you know, the pizza doesn't draw me anymore. None of that stuff draws me anymore.
Here's what she said. No meal after that, after she had that wonderful euphoric feeling, was complete without ample fat. A week or so later, I was compelled to eat meat again after several years. Remember, she mentioned she was a vegetarian. Not to mention mornings after that, I remember washing off my makeup mid-application, realizing that a different person was looking back at me in front of the mirror. So probably seeing less glycation because of the lack of the sugar and the proteins.
Yeah, and one thing too reminds me of that when I go on these competitions and I'm rooming with one of my buddies or two of my buddies, and they're dropping weight, and I'm eating fat, and they're doing, you know, all these things of not eating and not drinking and doing their saunas or whatever, and I'm just eating fat and having a good time, and I'm dropping the weight and a lot faster than they are.
Right, and a much easier.
Much easier, and I'm not hungry, so I'm not punishing myself at all. So it really brings that to mind.
So Kat talks about how from that newfound love of fat, she became the incredible shrinking woman, and it continued uninterrupted until she lost not one, not two, but 10 dress sizes. That's a significant weight loss.
Yeah, and in addition...
Literally unrecognizable, she says.
Yeah, well, from their pictures, it's for sure, and that was just the picture of the face. In addition, virtually every chronic head-to-toe condition I accepted as my fate fell away during that phase. The painful canker sores, bladder infections, the bloating, the black moods, the sniffling, the flaking, the red eye, the chin rashes, and dry skin. Go on.
Yeah, how many people? Yeah, dizziness upon standing and blurry vision, and last but not least, the binging demon that had controlled her for more than a decade, never to return, not even for a day in the 25 years since. Good girl, Kat. She really stopped and said, all these symptoms that I'm feeling is a result of my choice, my lifestyle choice of the foods that I'm going to put in, your fuel. We've got to change our fuel.
Yeah.
And when we change our fuel, we can feel good.
That's right. It says family and colleagues assumed it was willpower. It wasn't. It was profound, permanent, mind-blowing biochemical peace.
I like it.
We'll be right back, folks. Pick up some Primal Edge of us and pick up some our newsletter, very important. And we'll be right back, 877-927-6640. Welcome back, folks. We're talking about Kat James and her book, The Truth About Beauty. And one of the great things about her is, of course, we just went through the whole incredible shrinking woman thing where all of a sudden all her black moods, her sniffling, the flaking, the blurry vision, all these things kind of were transported. But, of course, she started her career as a makeup artist.
Yes, she was in the beauty industry, so she was working with celebrities. And as she said, she was living in a world of anorexics and fat folks. And people were clamoring to know in the industry, you know, what she had done. And when they saw how she had transformed herself, you know, they were clamoring for her to give her endorsements for lipstick companies and beauty products, but it was all about, Kat, talk about why this lipstick makes your teeth more white or why this makes you do this. They really didn't want to know the true secret that it was an inside job. And I love that about Kat James because she teaches people that beauty is an inside job. And so she was going on shows and she was not being allowed to talk about what transformed her beyond recognition without struggle, as she says.
I was to be interviewed by a top morning news anchor only as long as I didn't get into the details about diet or talk about any supplements, a huge part of my initial recovery, as this show had a lot of drug company sponsors.
Yeah, one food editor just looked at her like in shock and didn't even want to stand near her, she said, for a photo shoot after she told her that it was fat that had most transformed her body, her brain, and her relationship with food.
I guess they figured it was, you know, if they touched her too close, the fat would just come over.
Right. Yeah, it says an extreme makeover reality show pursued her to play the lead motivator role, and she took issue with the low-fat and calorie-counting shame weigh-ins and constant plastic surgery. She didn't want to be a part of you know, this way we're having these reality shows where people are being paraded in while the rest of us look, but we're finding out that they're not getting a lasting result. And, you know, we kind of went back from that, but as you all know, many of the initial 8 people have gained back their weight and then some and destroyed their metabolism, the people on the Biggest Losers. And this is a sad shame.
Yeah, and what these shows want is the struggle. So they want people to struggle. They want people to know that it's not easy to do this, but you have to get onto these programs that they have. So you have to fight for it. It's not going to be easy, folks, when it actually is if you change your lifestyle, you change the food, it's relatively easy. Now, for some of you who have been sick for a long time, or maybe eaten away for 40 years, there is a struggle there because you have to do supplementation to help your body respond to the right fats and to not respond so much to the sugars anymore. So you do need help in that.
It's kind of like when you're doing a fuel changeover. You do need a little time and a little transition as you're going through it.
Exactly.
But it's well worth the wait, and I think the results that we see with Kat are what we see with a lot of people. We see a lack of wrinkles. We see a lack of bloating.
We see it in ourselves.
Yeah, sure.
I see it in my wife, 70 years old and looking like a 50-year-old.
Absolutely. She does too, and she sticks with what she
does
she
it
lives
really
her
well.
lifestyle.
Yep,
you know, they asked Kat James about how long did it take for her to figure this out and figure out how to share it with people. And there were years that passed by where she kept waking up with the same incredible dream of literally effortlessly, this effortless physical freedom that could be shared with other people. And now we see, she was 20 years ahead of her time.
Certainly was.
Fixing herself, and here her system is really what we've been sharing for a long time.
And it's, imagine this is a time when the real high carb was institutionalized, and getting rid of our fat and cholesterol was institutionalized. This was a part of the 1990s and the 2000 era when everybody was doing this, and everybody was saying, "Oh, I'm getting so healthy," as we were getting heavier and sicker.
Right.
We really didn't know it.
And
I was part of that. You were part of that.
Sure.
And until we changed, did we ever realize that what was really going on? And she discovered this in 1990.
And she says, there was no dietary wisdom or dietary information aligned with what she had discovered for herself.
Right.
And she actually met Dr. Atkins. And she was eating much more fat, much less protein, very different foods than his diet. That's the key, folks. The diet she's recommending, which is really what we're recommending, is a diet that's a rich, healthy fat diet. Smaller amount of protein.
Yep.
Not, as I said, people
and really smaller amounts of fat. It's just that you have more fat than now. It's, even though if you're at 60 or 70% fat like I am, it's not a lot of quantity. So it's going along with your protein. And it's mostly animal fats, not so much of the fruit fats or the vegetable fats, and certainly none of the starchy fats that are associated with potatoes and pasta and things like that.
Listen to this comment, Nico. She says, I was eating much more fat, less protein, very different foods than his diet, and my physical changes were far broader. Okay, so she had a slight variation of Atkins. But in the meantime, I watched her powerful little health savior, which was fat, become demonized more than ever, and she watched healthy people steered by nutritionalists towards rice cakes and snack wells and Jell-O cups, sugar-free.
I remember those days.
It's amazing, and that's how when we can look outside the looking glass and we're looking in and we see what people have been recommended as food. These Frankenfoods.
I remember eating rice cakes and thinking how healthy it was and how terrible they tasted at the same time, So, and now I'm eating food that actually tastes real good and I know is healthy. So it's a complete switch around.
Well, all of this was bringing up these dangerous food obsessions. They brought on the weight struggle, the mental anguish, the emotional things that happen when you have these Frankenfoods. And so the average person, has not been able to escape, and now we see why we have this obesity epidemic, because of the people being misled.
Yeah.
So
after 15 years of honing and eliminating surprising foods that hindered success and threw off people's glucometer readings, such as juices, even vegetable juice, coffee, and most coffee substitutes, nut flours, milks, and butters in certain quantities or combinations, most protein powders, bits of carb or alcohol and flavorings, those things. She said, I could particularly guide others through the same set of sudden changes I had. So initially, you do have to remove things like alcohol, probably your nut flours, even coffee, probably for a while, I would say, if you're starting on this and you've been on the American diet for 20 years or more, I would say this is a necessary thing that you have to do. You really have to clean yourself up. And then slowly you can introduce the coffee again, because it does have certain benefits to it. And the same thing with some of the other things, like maybe small amounts of juices and butters that will be later assimilated. Although some people don't have trouble with butters. But she may be talking about different
She's talking about nut butters.
Nut butters.
She's talking about nut flours, milks, and butters. Not butter.
Right, exactly. So I think that's important. In 1994, she had a chance to meet the scientist at the Rockefeller University. His name is Jeffrey Friedman. He's the guy who identified leptin as the source.
A master hormone.
Yeah, a master hormone. The hormone, kind of like the ring that controls all the other rings. It's the hormone that controls other hormones to get you into a really good state of satiety.
Right, and she learned about its weight loss and satiety effects in rodent studies, which had the pharmaceutical industry salivating on how they might create a blockbuster drug. Yeah, well, isn't it a shame that that's what the drive is for? Let's find out. Let's do some research so we can create a drug. Why not just do some research to fix it?
Yeah.
We live in an upside-down world.
Well, we live in an economy that needs to grow and grow and grow and never stop growing. It's kind of crazy.
Yeah, we live in an upside-down world.
Yeah. Okay, the number here is 877-927-6648. You just have time to pick up some Primal Edge, our one-shot daily wonder of supplements. And, of course, our Health Signals newsletter, which new one is out next week. So we'll look forward to that.
Hey there, Paige Clark and Nico DeHaan. We're talking about resensitizing ourselves to the master hormone leptin and sharing some of the wisdom of Kat James and her research. She really was a beauty pioneer that really has shown us that beauty is an inside job, and her own transformation through her transformation program shows all of that. You know, more than 8,000 studies show leptin's multifaceted hormone regulating, tissue healing, and anti-inflammatory effects. It even was found in 2014 that leptin has direct impact on creating favorable microbial balance in our guts, which we now know to be a huge factor in obesity, immunity, and even personality. And this is very affirming in that a lot of people's eating disorders and addictions may be as a result of this hormone imbalance.
I think so, no doubt about it, because this is our self-control center, as she calls us, and its ability to balance, and the nervous system's explaining why most people who resensitize themselves, as it's described, feels the calmness and the
head clearness and calmness. You know, its immune modulating effects explain why autoimmune thyroid and skin problems clear up, and why so many even quickly lose their food sensitivities, even to dairy. Leptin frees up testosterone, which men and women need. And that explains the fitness models, often find that they just transform themselves without any of the additional help, so performance things, a lot of fitness people. Yeah,
she had a program that she put in Costa Rica, and she had a bunch of fitness models from Canada there, and they had to actually fire their trainer, who was always talking about hormones, or talking about steroids actually,
right,
instead of the hormones. So she says, for me the mystery's over, and you wonder why no one hears of this hormone whose recovered function achieved only by diet avoidance of the blood sugar and insulin spikes, and adding plenty of fat can make every blockbuster drug obsolete.
That's a huge statement right there, folks, if everyone would follow. And this is what we've been sharing with people for years as well.
Yes.
And we've really been trying to encourage people to realize that as sweet as sugar is, it is truly a bittersweet sweet, right?
Yeah, that's for sure. The bitter truth about the sweetness of it. She says, of course, she's thrilled about the truth about fat, and the more medical studies and more media is coming out and talking about this. But she also says that I'm amazed at how many people, and even doctors, still don't hear it. I mean, they hear it, but it's never internalized, I guess is what she means. Yeah, there's widespread misunderstanding among those newly converted fat and cholesterol phobes as to how the everyday higher fat dietary applications will play out on people's plates and in their real lives outside of the clinical setting. But especially for those with food, yeast, and adrenal and other crazy-making or compliance issues, she's observed, this can really provide a healthy, life-changing outcome. No doubt about it. She says, for the ultimate goal, in her view, sensitivity to the hormone leptin, where the end of the need for willpower and a quantum leap in fat burning come into view. Remember, waking up that cell membrane to be receptive to that key, the leptin key. Yeah.
is off the table because it requires individually calibrating one's dietary choices for their own unique thresholds, and that takes brand new knowledge.
Yeah, see, the interviewer here says it's surprising how limited dietary studies really are. Other than population studies, most human studies are based on voluntary food reporting. We've mentioned this before. There's literally no one living along with these people through this process in control of and observing the food intake over multiple days. So what you have is people at the end of the week or the end of 2 or 3 or 4 weeks getting a phone call and then, oh, what did you eat this last week or this last month? And that's the way they report it. And we find that people forget, they unintentionally overblow things, they misreport. There's a lot of things that happen in that type of reporting. So none of the things that are mentioned here really show up in those kinds of studies. What you really need is some really scientific studies, which there's thousands of them now.
And you also need anecdotal studies, like someone who's actually proof in the pudding. Let's look at how she's worked it. She makes the comment that she's saddened to think how many people who are desperate to experience the same level of permanent freedom that she has maintained for decades never will if they follow any one-size-fits-all low-carbish guidelines that can only work for what she calls Tarzan types, but not for the metabolically challenged folks that are everyday Americans that make up most people. In other words, the science on leptin is well established, but the dietary execution is a complex new frontier. The observational studies she's found for 2 decades literally observes that people's every bite can interfere with this flip happening over a 5-day period, and has a very unique and telling way that she has worked to hone her regimen. I'm actually going to pull her book back out because I read it probably 8 years ago, and I think it's a very fine-tuned procedure.
Well, because
little
leptin
sneaky things. Like even coffee.
Yeah, it can. Even our Primal Edge can spike sugar in the beginning if you're not healthy. The other thing is too, that there's many loopholes in leptin. In other words, things such as excess protein spikes insulin and is also pro-cancer. Things, superfood powders, I don't know.
Tinctures.
Tinctures. What's that?
Well, certain tinctures. It could be even herbal tinctures, I guess.
Okay.
So
Coffee,
you're going through
alcohol,
of
nut
all
powder.
the diets she mentioned, all the people may feel incredible improvements. There's some leptin loopholes. That's what you're kind of going through. The things that can still interfere with leptin. So it was the excess protein.
Your nut powders, your nut butters, your nut milks, the types of chocolate. Yeah,
the superfood powders. A lot of people are taking so many superfood powders. They've got all these berries and fruits, the acai berry, they're still insulin spikers, even though they're
especially
healthy.
if you're not eating any fat, because a lot of these things are fat soluble. They need fat to metabolize everything. So you really have to look for the food at first, and then get somebody who really knows what they're doing, like Paige, that can steer you in the right direction of getting the right supplements, whether you need more acid or you need less acid, or whether you need help with your probiotics, prebiotics, or whether you need sound therapy or light therapy. All these things have a place in becoming normalized.
That's right. Healing is a quantum effect, and we get better results. The more things we implement, the more we change our life, the more we change the way we think, the way we breathe, the way we move.
And I'm always looking for stuff like that. When I found the saunas,
Yes.
I plunged right into it and felt the effects immediately. So now I'm the sauna guy in the neighborhood for sure. Adding more fat to things. When my pork chop doesn't look like it has the fat on it anymore, I'll put some butter on it. That's the way I'm thinking now, and it all boils down to that real satisfaction, that clear-headed thinking, where I'm saying, boy, I feel pretty good.
Yeah, I think that's great.
Yeah.
I really want to go over these loopholes again, because I think many people that have listened to our show, they're trying to change. They maybe still have a few pounds. Sometimes these other little things can sneak in. I want to mention to you, if you're not where you want to be, if you're starting to feel you have some food cravings, if you're not at your ideal weight, we want to take a look. Are you drinking excess protein shakes? Are you eating too much protein, period? You want to calculate your ideal protein. We can help you with that. You want to watch those superfoods. Maybe cut out the coffee for a little bit. Take a little change. It only takes a few days, as she says, 5 days, and you can trigger this health-promoting leptin youthifying master hormone. So we're going to come back and talk a little bit more about how you can turn on these youth genes.
Yeah, let's talk about some of these things that we can do to help ourselves get healthier.
We'll be right back after the
Welcome back, folks. You know, most people don't realize they can be far freer of energy lulls, weight loss plateaus, sleep, joint, thyroid, autoimmune mood, or skin, or any of the remaining cravings, or because they need to avoid
excess protein.
Exactly.
Did you guys hear that? I think that many people, and I always say this over and over again, think because we like a primal or paleo, they picture Fred Flintstone with a brontosaurus steak, you know, wearing down his golf cart, right?
Right, exactly.
They think that's what we're recommending. That is not what we're recommending.
No,
we're recommending a primal diet that has appropriate amount of, it's actually a naturally calorie-restricted diet.
It certainly is.
Nutrient-dense.
Yeah, and what she is saying, in a sense, is that most people gravitate naturally to a little bit more protein because they're used to eating more, and now they don't have the carbohydrates. So naturally, the only thing that's really there that looks like food, it's not the fat, it's the protein. So naturally, they'll overeat that in the beginning, and your leptin just hasn't kicked in yet. You haven't been satisfied. So as soon as it does, you'll notice that portion is going to go down. But there is danger, so you kind of have to restrict yourself in the beginning and start letting that fuel, which is the fat, take hold.
That's exactly right. Yeah, I think that's a great point. You know, a lot of people, you know, as you mentioned, they're trying to get over that use of the sugars, and then now they need to get the fat. So one of the ways you can calculate your ideal protein, I think most people are shocked to find out what the amount of protein is that's really for their ideal weight. The person who nailed it was Dr. Melvin Page. You know who he was?
No.
He was a dentist from St. Petersburg, Florida.
Really?
And you can go Google the Page Plan, P-A-G-E, okay? The Melvin Page diet. And he was responsible for transforming so many people's physiology, and I really believe it was a leptin sensitivity type of diet. And he calculates your need for protein. For example, for me to maintain my ideal weight, the calculation is such that I would need only 7 ounces of protein a day. Now, how many people go out?
That's
they have their egg.
On my hand.
They have their that's a day. Yeah. They have their egg in the morning, and they have a pastrami sandwich at lunch or something, and then they're having a steak or something for dinner.
Yeah.
So, but the key is distributing your protein, because we don't store protein, so that you can have it through 3 meals. So maybe for someone like me, you're exactly right. It's really more like 2 to 3 ounces of meat or protein at a meal. So I want you all to kind of really reevaluate your use of protein, make sure it's distributed, and make sure it's probably at a much smaller rate than you are.
Too. And she says also it's also a must for those who experience epilepsy or migraines, different itises, incurable types of diseases that they've kind of accepted as part of aging. Once mastered, it's a stunning mechanism you can turn on and off at will. Once you understand your own thresholds for doing so, no more counting, no more portion control, you never experience hunger once your leptin is in control. If you've done it right, you can maintain by feel. This is a little known requirement to make it happen, is what people are mostly missing, and that's what I'm feeling all the time. And she's right, it is switched on and off. Sometimes if you have a little bit more to drink, you can kind of have that switch, and all of a sudden you can see the hunger getting in there and you want to eat some nuts or something like that. But it does go away.
Right.
So it's pretty interesting, folks. Recommend getting the book, The Truth About Beauty, with Kat James. She's an awesome gal. I listened to some of her podcasts. I was kind of turned off because there was a whole segment in there, lots of commercials and stuff, so she's commercialized herself. Well, that's what we do in America and the EU, I guess, because we have to make a living. I was kind of turned off that there were so many commercials in there. But at the same time, the information is there. It's really good. I recommend you take care and read that book.
Have a wonderful day, everyone. Stay healthy. We'll see you next time on Living a Primal Lifestyle.
Thanks for sticking around, folks. We'll see you next time. Don't forget the Primal Edge, my newsletter coming up, our newsletter, I should say, picking up these really important subjects for you. Thanks a lot for sticking around.
You're watching Tiger TV.